What makes a good Spider-Man villain? Good question. Today I'm going to answer that. But before we get to that, subscribe. 86% of you aren't actually subscribed to the channel, but if you clicked on this video, then that means you like Spider-Man. This channel's literally Spider-Man. You don't get more Spider-Man than this, so yeah, just subscribe. Anyways, what makes a good Spider-Man villain? It's a very good question, and I think that one some movies, comics, and games fail to do, especially with the recent Zeb Wells run. You guys, if you've seen my videos, you know I'm not a massive fan of that comic run. What a good villain is very subjective and can be a fierce debate. On one hand, you have villains that have motivations and beliefs written in a philosophical world problem like Thanos, who wanted to solve overpopulation. But then you have villains that don't really have a rhyme or reason as to why the way that they are, but their belief stems from the heart purely rooted in evil. Examples of this could be the likes of the Joker, or in the early comics, the Green Goblin. A good recent example of this is actually High Evolutionary from Guardians 3. We don't really get much backstory to the High Evolutionary and the way that he actually is and the reason why he kind of commits all of the atrocities that he does, but he's a good villain nonetheless without that backstory. He's just kind of evil. That's just the way he is. Either way, I believe that villains like Thanos can actually make you sympathize with them and actually are the best way to go. But like I said, it's heavily subjective on what you consider a good villain to be. And yes, it does come down to opinion rather than objectification. Because on one hand, someone could like the more philosophical type villains like Thanos, and on the other hand, people could like villains like the High Evolutionary, who are just kind of evil because they are, and maybe they're more fun for people. But personally for me, I enjoy villains like Thanos. I like villains that you can reason with, that you can actually sympathize for. Not only does having a villain like this raise the stakes for both the hero and the villain to be successful, but you can resonate with the villain despite them perhaps being unlikable. However, people can prefer the latter, where the villain is pure chaos, which is completely fine. The idea of what makes a good villain in general could be quite problematic. But since I have a preference as to what I think makes a good villain in general, what are my criteria for a good Spider-Man villain? I have 4 points that I believe make a great Spider-Man villain. I've compiled a bunch of similarities that the universally best considered Spider-Man villains have in common, along with some of my personal favourite reasons as well. So without further ado, let's do this. This is what I consider to be a great Spider-Man villain. Number 1. The villain has to be a normal person with normal problems. One thing that is true to every Spider-Man story is that at least 70% of it is Peter Parker being broke or not getting women. Poor guy. Either way, Spider-Man stories are known for their grounded nature. They are rooted in Peter Parker's everyday problems, not just the crime fighting of Spider-Man. One thing that I hate is when villains try to step out of Spider-Man's realm where he works best. Yes, I've advocated many times on this platform that I would love to see new stuff be experimented with Spider-Man. However, a common theme across villains that are outside Peter Parker's grounded nature are always usually considered the weaker ones. Examples of this are Mephisto, Morlun, Rabin. All of these villains that I have just listed have at some point been or are still attached to a problematic Spider-Man story for one reason or another. Whether it's to do with some kind of power that they possess or how out of the realm they are from the Spider-Man mythos, it might be a backwards way of thinking about it, as with this mentality, you are confining Spider-Man to a set of standards for the villains that he has in his rogues gallery. But I firmly believe that the best villains are the ones with normal lives, with normal human problems, just like Peter Parker does. And we'll actually refer back to this point later on in the video. This makes them more relatable. Just as you would give Peter normal and relatable problems and flaws, do the same with the villain. Make us feel for him or her. Show us why we can relate to them as a human being. If you're a mystical god, magic-wielding, alternate dimension-hopping time traveler, or the devil himself, you're not very relatable, let's just be honest. So yeah, make them normal. Number 2, give them a connection with Peter Parker. This point, in my opinion, is the most crucial of them all. And if you're gonna nail one of these right, nail this one. Let's use the Spider-Man movies, for example, as there are a limited amount of them. Let's look at the best ones and where the best villains come from. What do all of them have in common? The villain has a personal connection to Peter Parker. The main antagonist of Spider-Man 1 and 2, TASM, Homecoming and No Way Home, and Into the Spider-Verse, all have a solid connection to Peter or Miles Morales. To go further with this, both Insomniac games followed this trend too, and most good comic books featuring Spider-Man follow a similar sort of model as well. It's all well and good pointing out the obvious, but why is this so crucial? Branching out from the point I made before, Spider-Man stories are about Peter Parker and Peter Parker only. If you don't get a solid story for Peter Parker first, then you don't have a Spider-Man story. That is just a solid, concrete rule when it comes to telling stories with Spider-Man. A great storytelling device that comes from Peter Parker knowing or having a relationship with the man or woman that ends up becoming the villain is that you get to use the reveal of the secret identity. And a big part of Spider-Man's story is his secret identity. It is a core part of the character. And the power that that reveal holds is unmatched no matter how many times you use it. And being able to connect both villain and hero, seeing them turn from mentor and student, friends, father and son, brothers, into hero and villain is gut-wrenching, but it's satisfying. Connecting the villain's story, especially the personal life of the villain, to tie into the life of Peter Parker, seems to be a concrete formula that works for Spider-Man stories. Let's look at some examples of how this is done really well. In Spider-Man 1, Norman is Peter's adoptive father figure and person that he looks up to until he realizes the morals of Uncle Ben far outweigh what Norman gave to him. Norman also saw more of a son in Peter than he did Harry. In Spider-Man 2, Doc Ock was everything Peter wanted to be, a successful scientist with the world at his fingertips. Peter and Otto related with each other on an intellectual level. They both found someone that shared their intellectual passion. In Spider-Man 3, there was no personal connection between Peter and the villains, apart from Harry Osborn, but since he wasn't the main antagonist, it doesn't really count. Also, a little disclaimer here, I thought I'd point this out while I'm editing this video. When I said personal connection to Peter Parker, I know Sandman has that personal connection with Peter in that he killed Uncle Ben, but what I mean is that they were never, like, intertwined, as in they were never friends with each other. It wasn't like a good relationship turned bad sort of thing. Like, yeah, their stories intertwined through an event that happened, and those type of things are fine as well, but personally, I prefer it where they both know each other in their personal lives. I just think it ties into the identity thing a lot better. But anyway, yeah, that's just one thing I want to clear up, because I know people will come at me saying that there is a personal connection, but that's not what I mean. You know it's not what I mean. In TASM 1, not only was the same type of relationship between Doc Connors and Peter that there was between Peter and Ock in Spider-Man 2, but in TASM, Connors also had that late relationship with Peter's father as well, which furthered the connection that they would go on to have in the film. And in TASM 2, there was no personal connection between Peter and the villains, and it is generally considered one of the weaker movies. Apart from Harry Osborn, but since he wasn't the main antagonist... Oh, wait, hold on, did I just say this? In Spider-Man Homecoming, Peter is dating the villain's daughter and has to either give up being Spider-Man or sacrifice the person he could eventually go on to love. In Far From Home, there wasn't really much of a connection between Quentin Beck and Peter Parker. I guess you could say that Quentin related with Peter before revealing that he was the villain, but I don't know, there was really no proper or emotional depth that was explored with that relationship. I felt like it was very much just surface level. In No Way Home, Norman related with Peter on a scientific level, similar to how Doc Ock did in Spider-Man 2. And then, well, he killed Aunt May, so, you know, I don't think I really need to say much more. I think I've probably made my point by now. You get it though, right? Peter, when having a connection personally to the villain, has a significantly bigger impact emotionally and dramatically on the story that you want to tell. Therefore, I believe that it's a necessity. Number 3, they have to parallel Peter Parker in some way. This could be visually, emotionally, arc-wise, anything. I think that some of the best Spider-Man villains are a representation of what Peter could become, or something that Peter doesn't want to be. I also love it when Peter's villains become something that's the opposite of what Spider-Man is. Like how Matt Gargan becomes a scorpion because, you know, it hunts spiders. Or how Venom is just Spider-Man but evil. I don't know why, I just love that little detail of Spider-Man villains. Either way, I love when villains visually or narratively parallel Peter or Spider-Man in some way. I think it adds a little bit something extra to the film or the comic or the game or whatever story you're trying to tell. It's usually a great way to represent the villain's morals and ethics moreover than anything. Number 4, the villain needs to cause Peter to have some kind of social and ethical dilemma. One great thing that villains are used for in stories just as a whole is being able to introduce the idea of some kind of dramatic or ethical dilemma that involves the hero and their moral compass, or the moral choices that they make in the story. And I also believe this to be one of the more crucial points to have in your Spider-Man story as well. Now, I'm just going to give a quick disclaimer. You guys know I'm not the best at explaining things, but I'm going to do my absolute best here to explain this. So, When a villain causes Peter to have some kind of moral dilemma, they are usually the better type of villains. Sort of like how Adrian Toomes made Peter choose between stopping him or disappointing his daughter in Spider-Man Homecoming. These sorts of moral dilemmas force Peter to make a tough decision, and the best kind of Spider-Man stories are when Peter's moral code are pushed to their absolute limits. And if you have a villain that can successfully achieve this, then you have a great villain. Another example of this is in Spider-Man No Way Home, where Peter wants to kill Norman Osborn, and if he does, then the Goblin wins. His point will be proven, and Peter has given into his inner desire to want revenge, which is ultimately what the Green Goblin wants to draw out of him. But Peter has to fight that inner desire, and if executed right, which it was, Peter doesn't give in to that desire, and it makes for a great story and a great test of character. A good villain can cause Peter to be pushed to his last fight, his last moral act, and his limits as a character, physically and mentally. Either way, those are my 4 points as to what makes a great Spider-Man villain. If you enjoyed this video, like it. If you haven't subscribed and you made it this far, I don't know what you're doing. Obviously, you like Spider-Man if you've gotten this far, so just subscribe. I mean, we're a Spider-Man channel, right? I mean, come on, man. Just subscribe. Also, if you want to use the members page, you want to get involved with the members, and if you really like my content, then just for 99 pence a month, you can get every single video that I upload early. I know, just 99 pence. That's insane, man. And then the upper tier, which is £2.99, so still really, really cheap. You can get exclusive content that only the members get to see. So, just keep that in mind. With that being said, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care, and peace.